No Sith Lord ever succeeded in ending the Jedi. For 1,000 years, they tried through war, deception, and corruption, and every attempt failed. Then came Palpatine, and in a single generation, he accomplished what a millennium of Sith could not. As shown across the Star Wars films, he could see the future through the Force, strike down enemies without lifting a finger, and bring entire star systems under his control. By every measure, Palpatine had won. And yet, after scouring canon sources, including films, series, novels, and comics, we discovered that 5 individuals kept him in constant fear, not because they could defeat him in battle, but because they threatened the 3 things he feared most: loss of control, a broken destiny, and powers he could not dominate. These are the 5 who made the most powerful Sith Lord in history genuinely afraid. The first and oldest of these threats had watched Palpatine's rise for centuries without ever sensing the darkness hiding in plain sight. As shown in the film Revenge of the Sith, the Emperor's true weapon was not the lightsaber or Force lightning. It was breaking people from within. He found their fears and doubts, then used those weak points to defeat them mentally. This method worked on almost everyone. Jedi gave in to despair, politicians fell to ambition, and military leaders broke under pressure. Yet one Jedi proved immune to all of it, and that single exception troubled Palpatine for decades. 800 years of life had given Yoda something different, a mind completely at peace with itself. Over that long span of time, he had faced darkness before and come through it unchanged. He had survived losses that would have broken others, witnessed tragedies that would have driven lesser beings to despair, and confronted his own capacity for darkness without being consumed by it. Through it all, he kept his faith in the light side of the Force. This inner peace created a serious problem for Palpatine, because his plan to end the Jedi depended on breaking their spirits as much as defeating them in battle. Physical victory was only half the goal. The other half was making sure no Jedi ever rose again. Despite witnessing the end of everything he built, Yoda never lost faith and never gave in to despair. The film depicts Order 66 as more than just a military operation. It was designed to end hope itself. The clone soldiers who had fought beside the Jedi for years turned on them without warning, striking down masters who had trusted them with their lives. Padawans were hunted through temple halls they had called home, and the younglings, the future of the Order, were lost in a single night. Yoda felt all of it through the Force, sensing the loss of thousands of Jedi across the galaxy, and watching the Republic transform into the Empire. By all logic, this should have been enough to crush him. This meant Palpatine had failed to achieve his real goal, the complete spiritual defeat of the Jedi. In the Senate duel shown in the film, Palpatine faced Yoda at the height of his dark power. Lightning filled the air as Palpatine unleashed his rage, while Senate pods became weapons hurled through the chamber. Throughout this chaos, Palpatine kept escalating his attacks, each one designed to break Yoda's spirit through sheer display of power. However, Yoda stayed calm through every moment. He met each attack without fear, responded to each escalation without losing his center, and faced the full power of the dark side without being overwhelmed. He did not win the duel outright, since the fight ended without a clear winner, and he was eventually forced to retreat. Even so, he survived without breaking. Yoda proved that power does not equal control, and this truth haunted Palpatine for years. According to the film, the Grand Master could be driven into hiding on Dagobah, forced to live in isolation at the edge of the galaxy, but he could not be made to serve darkness or lose hope. The Jedi Order might be scattered, with its temples closed and its members gone, but the idea of the Jedi continued to exist. The possibility that new students could be trained remained open, and living proof that darkness did not have to win still breathed somewhere in the galaxy. Because of this, Palpatine knew Yoda represented something he could never fully become through Force. This was not fear of losing a fight. It was fear of being unable to finish a 1,000-year project. As long as Yoda's unbroken mind stayed connected to the Force, the work was not truly done. Some threats cannot be removed through combat, and some enemies cannot be beaten through superior power. Yoda was both, a reminder that even absolute power has limits when it meets a mind that refuses to yield. Yoda was not the only threat to Palpatine's plans, however. Another Jedi who fell long before the Empire posed an even greater danger, one that struck at the very foundation of everything Palpatine hoped to build. In the film The Phantom Menace, Qui-Gon Jinn was unlike any other Jedi on the Council. The entire Sith plan depended on turning Anakin Skywalker to the dark side. This was not one option among many, but the only path to success. Everything else, including the Clone Wars and the fall of the Senate, served this one goal. Anakin was the key, which meant anyone who could have saved him represented a serious threat to the entire Sith design. Qui-Gon was exactly that kind of threat, and his way of teaching could have changed everything. The film establishes that the Jedi Master who found Anakin on Tatooine worked differently from other Jedi. While the Council stressed rules and tradition above all else, Qui-Gon followed the living Force, a more direct and immediate connection to its energy. Because of this difference, he questioned the Council's rigid ways openly and trusted his own sense of the Force over their collective judgment. When the Council said Anakin was too old to train, Qui-Gon prepared to train the boy anyway. Similarly, when they warned about the dangers of attachment, he saw hope and potential instead. Most importantly, the film shows Qui-Gon seeking Anakin clearly for what he was from the very beginning. Not just a powerful Force-sensitive child, but the chosen one, destined to bring balance to the Force according to ancient prophecy. Under Qui-Gon, Anakin would have learned to handle his emotions, and that single change would have made Palpatine's plan impossible. The Jedi Order's approach to feelings created the very weakness Palpatine later used. Students were taught to push down their emotions and reject attachment. For Anakin, someone full of passion and desperately afraid of losing those he cared about, this created exactly the inner conflict the Sith needed. The suppression the Council demanded created shame. The shame created secrets. And the secrets created distance between Anakin and the Jedi who might have helped him. That distance gave Palpatine his opening. In contrast, Qui-Gon's view of the living Force included emotion as part of life itself, not something to be denied. He could have taught Anakin to understand his feelings without being controlled by them. With Qui-Gon as his teacher, that resentment toward the Jedi likely never forms, and Palpatine would have nothing to exploit. The danger went even further, because Qui-Gon had knowledge that could have given Anakin something Palpatine could never offer, a way to live beyond death. Over the years, the Dark Lord carefully built Anakin's inner pain by acting as the understanding authority figure the Council refused to be. When the Jedi lectured, Palpatine listened instead. When the Council dismissed Anakin's frustrations, Palpatine validated his feelings. All of this worked because Anakin felt the Jedi did not understand him. As revealed in the series The Clone Wars, Qui-Gon learned how to keep his consciousness alive within the Force after his body passed. He discovered the path to spiritual survival that the Sith had always sought but never truly found. The series shows this knowledge later passing to Obi-Wan and Yoda, helping them guide others during the dark times of the Empire. Anakin's greatest fear was losing the people he loved, and Palpatine exploited this by promising that the dark side could prevent death. But Qui-Gon could have offered something better. Not the prevention of death, but the transcendence of it. A healthy Anakin, taught by a master who understood the living Force and equipped with knowledge of the path beyond death. This version of events leaves no room for Darth Vader. Qui-Gon threatened the Sith plan before it could even start. His loss on Naboo at the hands of Darth Maul was therefore one of the most important moments in galactic history, not just because a great Jedi was gone, but because the one person who might have saved Anakin was removed entirely. Palpatine never had to face Qui-Gon directly, but the fear of what he represented was real. While Qui-Gon's loss removed one threat, the one who actually turned to the dark side brought dangers of his own, dangers that followed Palpatine for the rest of his life. As established in the films The Phantom Menace and Revenge of the Sith, one truth stands out above all others. The Chosen One was always a problem. Even after Anakin became Darth Vader, even after decades of loyal service to the Empire, and even after he seemed completely consumed by the dark side, the prophecy remained. According to the prophecies shown in the films, the Chosen One would end the Sith, not merely defeat them in battle, but end them completely and permanently. This was the will of the Force itself, a destiny woven into existence before Anakin was ever born. No amount of manipulation could erase what the Force had decreed. Palpatine could not change this destiny, so he could only try to control it, and that required constant watch. With every other threat, Palpatine could work toward elimination, but you cannot destroy destiny, and you cannot outmaneuver the will of the Force. His plan was therefore to corrupt rather than remove. If Anakin was fated to end the Sith, then Palpatine would make sure Anakin became a Sith himself. Vader would bring down every Sith except Palpatine, and as a result, Palpatine would survive alone as the last of his kind. This approach worked, to a point. With Vader's help, the Jedi fell, the Republic transformed into the Empire, and Palpatine gained supreme power. But the prophecy was not erased, only delayed. Anakin still existed somewhere within Vader, buried but not gone. Vader was therefore kept powerful but incomplete, strong enough to serve, but never strong enough to overcome his master. As shown in the comics Star Wars Darth Vader and the novel Lords of the Sith, every meeting between Emperor and apprentice carried an undertone of distrust. Palpatine tested Vader constantly, assigning impossible tasks, holding back approval, and reminding him of past failures. This was careful management of a threat to his very existence, ensuring the apprentice never grew strong enough to fulfill the prophecy. The comics reveal how Palpatine needed Vader strong enough to enforce his will across the galaxy, yet Vader could never reach his full potential. The mechanical limbs that replaced his burned flesh added to this limitation. His connection to the Force, while still vast, worked through metal that could never match his original form. Similarly, in the novel, Palpatine also cultivated Vader's psychological wounds. He fed Vader's guilt over his past actions, reminded him of his betrayal of Obi-Wan, and kept the loss of Padme alive as a wound that never healed. These injuries kept Vader focused on his failures rather than his potential for growth. Palpatine watched for any sign that Vader remembered his past because that could mean the beginning of the end. Every hint of feeling that surfaced in Vader set off alarm. The fear was always of Vader becoming whole rather than staying broken. A Vader who healed, reconnected with the light, and embraced his identity as Anakin Skywalker could fulfill the prophecy in the worst possible way. Anakin was simultaneously Palpatine's greatest tool and greatest threat, useful precisely because of the power that made him dangerous. There was also the chance that if Anakin broke free, he might finish what the prophecy started by taking Palpatine's place. Either way, Palpatine would be gone. While Palpatine spent decades managing the Father, another Skywalker grew up unknown, one who would prove even more dangerous because he could not be predicted at all. As shown in the film Return of the Jedi, the throne room scene reveals Palpatine's greatest mistake. His power had always come from his ability to see the future through the dark side of the Force. This foresight let him glimpse events before they happened, giving him enormous advantages over opponents who could not see what was coming. His entire career depended on this predictive power, knowing which senators to buy, timing Order 66 at exactly the right moment, and anticipating resistance before it could organize. Luke Skywalker broke this system completely, and in doing so, he showed the basic flaw in how Palpatine understood the Force. The son of Anakin was a blind spot in Palpatine's vision. For years, the Emperor did not even know Luke existed. When he finally learned of the young man, he saw both opportunity and threat, another vessel for the Chosen One's power who could be turned or removed. But Luke did not respond to manipulation the way his father had. Where Anakin feared loss above all else, Luke had already experienced tremendous loss and come through it stronger. His aunt and uncle, his teacher Obi-Wan, and his quiet life all taken from him. Yet each loss strengthened his resolve rather than breaking his spirit. Similarly, where Anakin craved validation from authority figures, Luke was content to follow his own sense of right and wrong. Yet Luke refused the entire setup, and in that moment, he broke everything Palpatine believed about power. The film depicts the confrontation on the second Death Star with careful detail. Palpatine had set up every part of that meeting, the rebel fleet trapped, Luke's friends in danger, and the only way to save them appearing to be striking down the Emperor. The trap was elegant. If Luke refused to fight, his friends would be lost. But if Luke fought in anger, he would fall to darkness. But Luke found a third option. He threw away his lightsaber, not from weakness, but from understanding. He recognized that the choice itself was the trap. The only way to truly win was to refuse to play. In doing so, Luke showed the dark side is not destiny. This made no sense to a Sith because their philosophy assumes beings act in self-interest, fear drives choices, and power proves its own rightness. These beliefs had worked for Palpatine his entire life. However, Luke proved these beliefs incomplete. A person could choose love over fear, give up victory over principle, and reject offered power while becoming stronger through the rejection itself. As the novelization Return of the Jedi expands, Palpatine had no answer to this. His Force lightning could hurt Luke's body, but could not change his mind. His foresight showed a future where his own beliefs no longer applied, a future he could not manipulate because it operated by rules he did not understand. While the Skywalkers threatened Palpatine from within Force traditions he understood, one final threat came from a completely different place, a power that worked outside the Sith system entirely. The series The Clone Wars introduces a figure who challenged everything the Sith believed about their own position in the galaxy. The Sith had always assumed they were the ultimate masters of the dark side, and their entire tradition was built on this belief. The Rule of Two, the centuries of hidden work, and the careful gathering of knowledge all assumed Sith teaching represented the one true path to dark side mastery. This belief was central to Palpatine's identity and his claim to rule. Mother Talzin proved this belief wrong, and in doing so, threatened something more important than Palpatine's life. She threatened his right to rule. The series depicts the leader of the Night Sisters of Dathomir using a completely different system. Her power came from magic passed down through generations of witches who had never heard of Darth Bane or the Rule of Two. Through this tradition, she controlled the dark side without Sith training and wielded abilities without following Sith rules. The series shows Night Sister magic working outside both Jedi and Sith understanding, rituals that reached across vast distances, spirit manipulation, and techniques Palpatine did not fully grasp. Her power was real, demonstrable, and completely separate from everything Palpatine represented. For these reasons, Palpatine treated Talzin as a threat to the entire system, one he had to handle personally. According to the series, Talzin could attack Palpatine spiritually. She could harm him without ending his life. This concerned the Emperor in ways normal threats never would. Physical threats he understood and could defend against, but Talzin worked on a completely different level entirely. This distinction is significant. Most enemies received standard responses. A surviving Jedi might be hunted by Inquisitors. A rebel cell might face military action. These were tactical problems delegated to subordinates. Talzin, however, was different because she challenged his claim to be the Supreme Master of Darkness. These questions are at the foundation of everything he had built. His claim to power rested on being the pinnacle of Sith achievement. Talzin's existence suggested that claim might be hollow. In the end, Talzin proved the galaxy held powers Palpatine could never claim to master. As a result, Palpatine personally arranged her removal. This departure from his usual methods shows how seriously he took the threat. Normally, he preferred to corrupt enemies into servants or remove them through proxies. With Talzin, that approach would not work. She was too independent, too powerful, and too rooted in a tradition he could not corrupt. As depicted in the comic Darth Maul, Son of Dathomir, the only solution was complete removal of the Night Sister threat. The comic shows Palpatine pursuing this goal with resources he rarely devoted to any single target. The Night Sisters were gone not because they opposed the Empire politically or militarily. Rather, they were removed because they proved the Emperor was not what he claimed to be, the singular master of all darkness in the galaxy. Some threats challenge power directly, but Talzin challenged legitimacy itself, and that made her unacceptable.